let's go up to Paula Zahn, standing by in New York right now. Paula?
Thanks so much, Leon. For more perspective now on the strike against Iraq, we turn to Lawrence Eagleburger. He served as Secretary of State during the first Bush administration. He joins us this morning from Charlottesville, Virginia. Welcome. Good to have you with us this morning, sir.
Good to be here.
We have heard all morning long that it is the belief of the current Bush administration that at a minimum these airstrikes have created some chaos in Baghdad. Is it your belief that Saddam Hussein is still in control?
Oh, there's no way to tell. I hope not, but there's no way really to tell at this stage. I just don't know. I don't know that anybody can tell.
The one thing Secretary Rumsfeld has indicated is that the U.S. is in touch with the top leadership of the Iraqi military, mainly through email communication. How effective do you think that might be in getting some of the Iraqi military leadership to turn on Saddam Hussein?
I think that's a great ploy. I'd never, you know, if they can keep their computers going, we may have a whole new tactic of warfare here. I wouldn't be at all surprised if these generals, now that they realize that this is the end, they know they're going to lose, if they decide that it's time to quit, and indeed, if they can get away, if they can figure out a way to deal with Saddam's security forces, if they wouldn't decide that they would like to take him out as well. So I think it is really a very clever step forward to be trying to convince these generals that it's time for them to quit, and in fact perhaps for them to see if they can't find some way to eliminate Saddam Hussein at the same time. So I think this is hopefully it will be effective, and I must say if these generals have any sense at all, they realize that this time it is the end. Their careers are over.
You got to believe they see what happened in Qasr today, and they've got to be a little intimidated by that, right?
That's right. That's right. You know, the other thing that strikes me is that the burning of these oil wells this time ought to tell everybody, because these are Iraqi oil wells now, that Saddam Hussein or whoever is doing this has no concern whatsoever about the Iraqis. When they burned the Kuwaiti oil wells the last time, at least you could understand it, I guess. But this time they are burning their own oil wells, and it is only the Iraqi people that are going to pay the price for that. I simply do not understand how anyone could see this as anything other than punishing their own people.
Yeah, the Secretary of Defense made it very clear that anybody who is involved in sabotaging these oil fields should be tried. Back to the issue of how this campaign is unfolded. A lot of people caught off guard on Wednesday night when this very strategic strike was made, and we're just beginning to learn more information about how small that window of opportunity was. One of our reporters early this morning said the president gave the order with just 3 minutes left to dispatch some of those stealth fighters. Help us understand what it might be like to be part of last-minute decision-making like that.
Well, the first point I think it would make is that it is, in fact, remarkable that the U.S. government can move that fast. I'm again struck by the fact that we were that efficient that you could get to the president with something like this in terms of getting the information, the intelligence, getting it to the president, getting his okay, and getting it back down so that the order could be issued, the firing could take place. I must tell you that you can talk about large government and bureaucracy and so forth. All I can tell you is this was a remarkably efficient operation so far as I can tell, and everybody must have been running around like crazy to get this thing done in time, and I'm impressed by it.
Sir, we got just 10 seconds left. Based on the fact that the shock and awe part of this campaign has been postponed, I'm wondering if you think it will ever be launched.
I doubt it. I think we moved so quickly and so well, I'm not at all sure it's necessary.
Well, we will be watching along with you to see what part of the campaign goes from here, where the campaign goes from here. Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, it's always good to see you. Thank you very much for your perspective this morning. Back to Bill Hemmer now, who's standing by in Kuwait, a country clearly on the edge and in the line of fire. Bill?
Hey, Paula, a statement from the U.S. Embassy coming out a short time ago just into us here at CNN talking about the missiles that have come into Kuwaiti airspace saying that all have fallen north of Kuwait City, which contradicts a little bit of the information we were given earlier today. We had been told that at least 3 of these missiles had targeted a large oil field well south of Kuwait City, but the embassy saying everything's gone north of the city. No chemical, no biological agents attached to any of these been detected, and unaware right now of any casualties or property damage. Yet to hear of any injuries or any fatalities as a result. Might be difficult for people to understand this one, though, but the airport here in Kuwait is still open. Kuwait Airways says it's still maintaining its regular flight schedule. However, the European carriers that fly into here, mainly Lufthansa out of Frankfurt and British Airways out of London, they've suspended all their service to Kuwait. One other note, the U.S. Embassy says it does not plan right now to evacuate any of its staff or any other American citizens living and working here in Kuwait. That should be a note of reassurance for those who make a home here in Kuwait City and the surrounding area here. Meanwhile, we want to talk about our embedded reporters, and they have given us fascinating insight. Watching these reports from Walter Roger, the 7th Cavalry, going up through central Iraq, fascinating stuff. Ryan Chilcote, meanwhile, northern edge of Kuwait, stationed with the 101st Airborne Division. Quickly before nightfall tonight, Ryan filed this report from his location there.
Elements of the 101st Airborne Division have moved out of a camp in Kuwait into an assembly area here in the Kuwaiti desert. I'd like to show you a bit of the assembly area now. We're going to go into what's called a hasty. In other words, a foxhole that the soldiers have hastily dug. It's a defensive position, gives them cover should there be some kind of incoming missile. There have been a lot of Scud alarms already, 3 yesterday, 1 today, already 3 confirmed missile attacks. This is to protect the soldiers should there be one on their position, protect them from any kind of shrapnel. The soldiers also in their chemical suits now. This is what's called MOP 1. It's the first of 4 stages of readiness for a chemical attack, for a chemical threat. It's the jacket that they're wearing and the pants. Obviously, it's pretty hot here now. We're in midday, and the soldiers are sitting in the shade waiting for action because it is pretty hot out in the open air. Ryan Chilcote, CNN, with the 101st Airborne in the Kuwaiti desert.
Ryan, thanks, and we'll check in as the events warn with Ryan. Meanwhile, Central Command has moved its command post from Tampa, Florida, to the country of Qatar. Jane Perlez is a writer for the New York Times and now joins us by way of Doha in Qatar. And Jane, I want to point out to our viewers that part of the multimedia display that we were expecting from the U.S. military was this giant, elaborate $250,000 Hollywood set where these briefings were expected to take place every day. In addition to that, it cost $47,000 just to ship the thing from the U.S. by way of FedEx. To this point, granted it's early, but it's Friday already, and we have yet to see a single briefing from there. Is there any indication from you as to why we have not seen Tommy Franks and others come to the podium there?
Well, I think there are several reasons. This is a general who is quite different stylistically to General Schwarzkopf in 1991, when everyone will remember that one of the enduring images of the 1991 Gulf War was Schwarzkopf with his flip charts and his videos. Here we have this expensive set, but the expensive set is really irrelevant because the pictures out in the field are speaking for themselves. And the pictures of Walter Rogers racing to Baghdad with the 7th Cav will be one of the enduring images of this war.
You seem to indicate, though, that the star, though, will be the pictures in the scene, and I think, based on what we're seeing thus far today, I absolutely agree with you. On the information side, though, are you getting it down there?
I wouldn't say so. I think there is an information policy that's been devised, that the information that comes out of Washington, out of the Pentagon or the White House. So for information that needs to be filled in on the details of what the embedded reporters are reporting, that's coming out of the Pentagon, not here.
Yeah, and also about the style on Tommy Franks, you touched on it. At what point do you believe Tommy Franks becomes media friendly, or is this a general who simply will not go there?
I suspect he probably won't go there until it really suits him, which may be when he ends up in Baghdad. I mean, the pictures, as I said earlier, are so much more compelling than Tommy Franks. And furthermore, Tommy Franks does not really feel that comfortable with the media. He is, in a way, the un-Schwarzkopf. Schwarzkopf befriended the media, played them to the hilt, and Tommy Franks tries to paint a different picture of the general busy running a very fast-moving war. So I'd be surprised somewhat if we even see him here.
Yeah, Jane, some people have referred to him as the anti-Schwarzkopf, but nonetheless a very busy man right now. Command and control there in Doha, Qatar. Jane Perlez, New York Times, thanks for your time today with us. Nightfall here in Kuwait, and one can only imagine Tommy Franks with all of his men and women spread out through this entire theater right now. 120,000 strong in Kuwait alone, about 250,000 throughout the region. A very busy man hunkered down there in Qatar. More when we get it live in Kuwait City. Here's Leon now at the CNN Center. Leon?
All right, thanks, Bill. Well, as battle cries ring out in Iraq, pleas for peace are also being heard around the world. Protesters are gathering here in the U.S. and at various points around the globe, calling for an end to the U.S.-led war in Iraq. In San Francisco, 1,400 people were arrested during protests that lasted some 18 hours there. Demonstrators are expected to be taking the streets again today. Around the country, there have been rallies of support of U.S. troops, and some of them in support of the war as well. This one you see here in Savannah, Georgia, an area with a very heavy military presence. Now, the latest CNN USA Today Gallup poll shows most Americans now firmly behind this war. More than 3 out of 4 polled say that they approved of the U.S. decision to go to war with Iraq. 7 out of 10 respondents said that the U.S. should not have waited any longer to launch that assault. About a third of those who were questioned say they feel some danger from terrorism now that war has broken out. Now, compare that with the pre-9/11 feeling from January of 1991, the beginning of the first Gulf War. Back then, 27% said they felt in danger from terrorism. Folks who are quite familiar with terrorism are those people who live in Israel. Our Mike Hanna is standing by right now in Gaza with the word of what's happening there. Hello, Mike.
Well, hello, Leon. I'm in Tel Aviv. Here, the situation's still calm. Israelis still taking all precautions, but Israeli authorities continuing to say that there's little likelihood of attack from Iraq. And also news from western Iraq of the capture of 2 major airfields there, once again giving an added sense of safety to Israelis. These airfields, or this vicinity of these airfields, were used as a base for Scud attacks in Israel, against Israel, during the last Gulf War. So Israeli authorities say they're still waiting for at least 48 hours. They will reassess the situation then. At this stage, they're asking the public to take precautions. They are continuing to fly 24-hour patrols, but they still say the likelihood of any attack here very minimal indeed. Israel, of course, completely supportive of that U.S.-led operation in Iraq. Not so the Palestinians. The divide very clear between Israelis and Palestinians on external affairs as well. Demonstrations by Palestinians in Gaza City in the course of the day. They're opposing the U.S.-led action in Iraq, supporting Saddam Hussein. There were posters of the Iraqi leader in the procession and chants of Saddam, Saddam as the crowds went through the streets of Gaza City. This similar to other demonstrations that have taken place in the Palestinian authorities, the Palestinian territories. The Palestinian Authority itself has expressed its opposition to the war, saying it prefers to see disputes resolved through negotiation. Israel, of course, supporting the war and supporting the U.S. action in Iraq. Leon?
All right, thank you, Mike. You be careful over there. Mike Hanna reporting live for us from Gaza. Now, reporting for us from the Iraq War Theater have been a number of reporters. If you've been watching, you know that we've got a lot of reporters who have been embedded with these various units, and we've been seeing some incredible behind-the-scenes and really in-action video and reports today. And here to bring all of that together for us to explain exactly how all these things fit together and where they're all heading is Renee San Miguel, who's joined by Major General Don Shepard. Hello, Renee.
Hello, Leon. Yes, there's been so much going on. Yesterday, obviously, the focus was on the airstrikes. Today, the ground war is in full effect of Operation Iraqi Freedom, and there's been so much going on throughout the country of Iraq. We really wanted to give you literally the big picture and tie it all together for the viewer, and so General Shepard joins us now for that. We just heard from Mike Hanna in Israel. Western Iraq, a big concern for Israel. Some airfields there now apparently in U.S. hands.
You bet, Renee. H-2 and H-3 airfields from which the Scuds were launched into Israel during the Gulf War. Reportedly, these have been seized today by combinations of United States Special Forces, Special Operations Forces, and Rangers. That's the big news in Western Iraq, and that's all good news.
Okay, and as we've said before, possibly weapons of mass destruction could be hidden at one of those. There's lots of buildings that could hide Scud missiles and things like that.
Could be. It's the key to seizing Western Iraq and also seizing perhaps forward operating air bases for operations in northern Iraq.
Okay. Now, southern Iraq as well here. We've had, as we've seen the video from Walter Rogers, but we want to talk first of all about all the different movements from the U.S. and British.
Yeah, indeed. What's gone on is action in the Al-Fa Peninsula down here, which is the southeastern tip of Iraq. And what's basically happened is United States Marines have moved north and then turned to the east to try to seize the Ramallah oil fields. They've also seized the port of Qasr, which is the key to commerce flowing out and in southeastern Iraq. And then the British have sealed off the Al-Fa Peninsula. So it looks like southeast Iraq and also western Iraq has been secured as other military operations go on.
Okay, so and then we've got the 3rd Infantry, 7th Cavalry, where Walter Rogers is based. We want to show you some of that video right now that he sent back earlier. Actually, this is the armored formation animation. As we talk about these armored formations paving their own road to Baghdad, what are we seeing as far as the advance?
This is the 3rd Infantry Division led by the 3rd and the 7th Cavalry Screening Force, and basically what you have is F-16s, A-10, Navy F-18s, and AV-8B from the Marines clearing the way, targets ahead of them, followed by helicopters, OH-68s and AH-64D Apache longbow helicopters, followed by M1 tanks, M2 and M3 scout vehicles and M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, followed by more tanks and more Bradley fighting vehicles. Embedded in all that is support tankers, that type of thing, ambulances, and then in the end here you have self-propelled artillery coming up at the end, the 109 self-propelled artillery and the multi-rocket launch systems. Okay. All of this is very agile force. It can be swung left, swung right as they encounter opposition. It's an awesome force. You're looking at something that goes up to maybe 20 miles in width as they move rapidly 20 to 30 miles an hour north toward Baghdad. And
refueling as they go, as we saw the fueling the tanker trucks that were coming up the rear there.
This is a major logistical miracle that you are watching here. You are moving entire cities north. They have to be refueled. They have to have ammunition with them. They have to maneuver and take care of obstacles as they go. They have to watch for mines. It's a major military operation, Renee.
Okay, Walter Rogers has been calling it a wave of steel all morning long, and indeed that's a pretty apt analogy. Major General Shepard, thank you for joining us. Leon, back on over to you.
The General may call that a logistical miracle, but as we go to Paula in New York, we've seen something else of a technological miracle, at least for the press, because we've been able to get these reports, like from Walter Rogers, of this and showing these pictures as these maneuvers are actually happening, and it's been absolutely fascinating.
It's been extraordinary, and I've come to understand that even members of the U.S. military hierarchy are watching these pictures very closely, getting immediate feedback about the progress their troops are making, particularly the division we're going to see that Walt Rogers is embedded with is doing. They are expected to be among some of the first troops to arrive in Baghdad. If that ends up being the case, there were some very tense moments earlier on when the 3/7th and our CNN team actually came under fire while trying to report this movement.
A U.S. Army source has told CNN that the U.S. Army 7th Cavalry has had its first hostile contact with the Iraqi forces on the other side of the border. They are describing it as relatively low-key, according to reports which we're receiving now, and these reports are somewhat conflicting. A number of Iraqi vehicles were taken out, including perhaps a number of tanks. That has slowed the U.S. Army 7th Cavalry's progress across the border into Iraq. We just heard an income. What the hell? No, I don't know what it is. Can you hear me? Atlanta, we just heard something shooting.
Wow. As it turns out, Walt Rogers said the military confirmed that it in fact was a tactical ballistic missile that had gone overhead. We are happy to report from Walt Rogers for the last 13 hours, his team has not encountered any kind of hostile contact. It has been extraordinary to watch the progress of what Walt calls the huge wave of steel. And we're going to try to show you some daytime pictures now to give you an idea at the speed at which they are moving. At some points moving 45 miles an hour through the Iraqi desert. About all they've encountered over the last 4 or 5 hours, based on Walt's reporting, are some nomadic tents and some Bedouins. they weren't expecting to find much humanity in this sparsely populated part of the the desert. Walt actually shared with us a little bit early on this morning the story of the shock of one of the military leaders thinking that perhaps he was running over some kind of anti-aircraft battery when in fact it was a part of one of these tents that had been set up in the desert by a Bedouin. Once again, Walt Rogers will be staying with this team. They say their mission is to provide some force for a regime change in Iraq. Once again, fortunately, they have not encountered any hostile contact over the last 13 hours by now. Bill?
Paul, I tell you what, there were a lot of skeptics about this embedded program, and I think you could have put me in that category as being one of them, skeptical as to whether or not this would be pulled off by the Pentagon. They're going to start a war, they're going to go into battle, and they're going to take 500 journalists with them, and not at the rear necessarily, but sometimes in the case of Walt Rogers, this is what the military calls the tip of the spear, rushing right through the center of Iraq. And the journalists who right now are embedded with the U.S. military, be it Marines, Air Force, Army, Navy, what have you, they came to Kuwait, Paula, weeks ago. They came here weeks ago to get ready, waiting for the call on when they should hook up with their units. And they also came here to test out this equipment. The technology that Walt Rogers is using to get us back these images, sometimes with a live picture, is something that we have never seen in the history of military conflict. And just talking with Jane Perlez in the New York Times a short time ago, listen, it's very early in this campaign, Paula, perhaps only 48 hours old if you go back to the attacks of Wednesday night. But so far, the images we're getting from people like Walt Rogers clearly are the star and the story right now for this war. Now listen, what unfolds tomorrow is beyond my comprehension. Predictions are a very dangerous game, but to this point anyway, it has given us a very up-close and personal view as to how the military right now is conducting themselves on the other side of the border.
Here, Bill, as they put the shock and awe part of the campaign on hold, and there is talk from the White House this morning that there is a belief that at a minimum those initial strikes have created some chaos in the Iraqi leadership. Thanks, Bill. We'll get back to you in a couple moments. Right now.